Libertarian Conference in Washington, D.C. But you can tell that the gravity of this coming week is really weighing heavily on the former president's mind because he's posted about the trial multiple times on Truth Social over the weekend. Tuesday is going to be the last opportunity that attorneys on both sides will have to make their case to the jury. And by Wednesday of this week, those jurors are expected to begin their deliberations. Let that sink in for a second because we're actually entering both historic and uncharted territory here. Up until now, no group of Americans has ever been charged with the task of determining the innocence or the guilt of a former president in a court of law. And this is all going down in less than 6 months from a crucial election in which the defendant is also a leading presidential candidate. No big deal, right? Well, this is anything but a small task, but a verdict in this case could be just days away. Right now, I'm joined by Tim O'Brien, Senior Executive Editor of Opinion at Bloomberg and an MSNBC political analyst, as well as the author of Trump Nation, The Art of Being Donald Trump, as well as my friend Suzanne Craig, a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter for the New York Times and co-author of the upcoming book, Lucky Loser, How Donald Trump Squandered His Father's Fortune and Created the Illusion of Success. Sue, you have spent a lot of time in court at 100 Center Street, so you have an up-close view as to how things have been going. The defense, they spent a lot of time cross-examining Michael Cohen during this trial. It seems like they may just be relying on the jury, thinking that he's not credible. Do you think that the defense has done enough to raise the specter of reasonable doubt, given what the prosecution's case laid out for them?
Well, when I think about what we're heading into with closing arguments, I think what the government has done is given jurors kind of two paths. One is you can believe some of what Michael Cohen said, despite all you heard, and the defense's case that he is a liar. He's lied on the stand in front of judges. He's lied to banks. He's lied on his taxes. And then there's also another path that I think they've tried to outline for the jury, and that is through the evidence, whether it's the documents or the corroborating witnesses that have come forward. So I think they've provided two paths, but Michael Cohen is still really crucial because he, despite all the documentary evidence that's come forward, he is still the only witness to some key meetings that you sort of have to buy into that, go to the criminal disguise of the documents to come to ultimately a guilty verdict. So it's going to be, can you still believe Michael Cohen, or do you just have to believe some of what he said? And I think that that's where the jury is going to have to, if they come to a guilty verdict at the end, they're going to still have to probably believe at least some of what he said, even though they've heard he's a liar.
No, that's absolutely correct. I tend to agree with you, Sue. We have talked about the fact that Michael Cohen is really the connector. He's the one who actually connects Donald Trump to the activity. And so on some level, maybe not all of his credibility matters, but at least enough for that connection to be created, that nexus to be believable. That is going to be important for the prosecution to be able to establish. Tim, I want to talk to you about the idea that Donald Trump's trajectory in terms of his mood has gone up and down. He's had a lot of bad days and he's had some good days. He's had days where the Supreme Court seems to delay the the presidential immunity decision. He's had days where Eileen Cannon has basically postponed the trial there. But he's also had days like last night where he gets booed at the Libertarian Convention. He's having a week that could be really bad for him in terms of his verdict, the verdict in this criminal case and what it could mean for him going forward. How do you think his team is preparing for what is ahead, given the sort of roller coaster nature of everything that he's been facing?
Well, I mean, I think his team will stay on message, Charles, which is that Donald Trump is being persecuted. He's a victim. These are Democrats and the far left and American institutions ganging up on him unfairly and weaponizing the government. That's been a constant theme in every instance, in every court case. And victimhood is a powerful message for the Trump team. It's one of their main tethers to their voters is You're a victim. You've been victimized. There are brown people and yellow people coming over the border to take advantage of you. There's the federal government in Washington, which is suffocating your ability to live the life you want. And I'm in court, and I'm being persecuted for it. I do think, however, that messaging only goes so far. I think it's useful to remember how much disagreement and dismissiveness there was of the January 6th insurrection before the congressional proceedings were aired on television. And a narrative came into the public realm with evidence and with testimony, and it was incontrovertible, I think, about what occurred there. It was an insurrection. And I think if you come out of this week's court case and some of the other, well, there won't be any other legal proceedings, I don't think, prior to the election. So this is the only one. It's not the strongest of the cases that have been in play, but the evidence that is presented has been damning. It is hard to believe that there wasn't a record-keeping fraud. It is hard to believe that he wasn't philandering behind his wife's back. It's hard to believe that he didn't pay money to cover all of that up. I think the stretch in this one will be whether that amounted to election interference and the extent to which Donald Trump was an architect of all of that.
Tim, Donald Trump pretty much as well as anyone else. You've literally written the book on him, even though Sue's book will soon be released. Lucky loser. I want to ask.
I can't wait to read it.
We know that a mistrial or a hung jury or an acquittal, as far-reaching as that might seem, will be a shot in the arm for Donald Trump and his campaign. He is not behaving like someone who really truly believes that he's ahead in the polls, at least that feels like he's comfortably ahead in the polls. What does a conviction do? What does that do beyond the narrative? We know what the narrative will be from a victim place, but Tim, what does a conviction do to the mood and the tone of Donald Trump and Team Trump afterwards, internally, regardless of what they may be saying outside?
Well, I think the voters that matter in all of this are moderate, independent voters who haven't made their minds up yet in 6 or 7 swing states. We're probably talking 2 million voters come November. And I think Trump's conservative allies and his liberal critics have already made up their mind about who he is, and I don't know that a conviction turns them either way. But I think for a large scope of moderate voters who care about institutions, who care about the rule of law, who care about civil conduct and decency, a conviction matters. And I think his team knows that. And it was interesting to watch Trump in the courtroom over the past few weeks disassociate himself almost from the proceedings. I know there's been a lot of speculation that he was sleeping, but I think on a number of occasions he was just closing his eyes, leaning back, and pretending he wasn't there, because there was a former porn star talking about sex with him in a hotel, and there was a former attorney for him talking about grifting and bookkeeping fraud, and the former publisher of the National Enquirer talking about weaponizing that publication against his enemies. And it was almost like, when a child sticks his or her fingers in their ear when you're correcting them for doing something wrong, and they're like, I can't hear you, I can't hear you. And I got that feeling in the courtroom is he is trying to get as far from the fact pattern that's being presented in front of him, because it's embarrassing, it's demeaning, and much of it appears to be very, very true.
Picking up exactly where we left off, I don't have a whole lot of time, but Sue, I got to ask you, everything that Tim just talked about, none of it said anything about election interference. And that's the narrative that the DA's office wanted people to buy into, not hush money, not cheating affair with a porn star. Did they make the case in terms of really framing this the right way, that the jury and the public understands that this is not necessarily about hush money, which isn't illegal, but that this is about the falsification of documents as an attempt to influence the election? Is that clear?
That's interesting, because I sat through every day of it, and I have to say one of the things I felt that the prosecution did an effective job of was setting that stage for the election interference. We went through several witnesses. We had David Pecker talking about just how concerned Donald Trump was about, the certain stories not getting out and, the catching and killing of stories. And then Hope Hicks came in, and I thought her testimony was very powerful and just taking us right back into 2016 in the moments, the month essentially heading into the election when that Access Hollywood tape came out and just how damaging that was to the campaign. And that really set the table then for Donald Trump and Michael Cohen and nobody wanting the stories about both Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal and Donald Trump's relationship with them to come out. So I thought, when I look back, I really was left with the idea that, the election interference, it was a strong argument that the prosecution was able to put forward. Whether or not we'll be able to get to a guilty verdict, because there's a lot of components to it, I don't know, but I thought that they did a good job on that point.
That was Tim O'Brien and Suzanne Craig, both setting the table and getting us started on this second hour of Velshi. And still ahead, why the right's war on diversity is even more dangerous and far-reaching than you think. Plus, a hugely important ruling that flew under the radar this week. What you need to know about a federal judge's scathing rebuke of the notorious legal doctrine that is often used by police to avoid accountability for violence or abuse. And then, the story of two women from opposite sides of the political divide coming together in a small act of courage to protect their community. I'm Charles Coleman Jr., and there's more Velshi after a short break.
Did we just get hustled? There's no way they were 70.
Interesting. It's both an electric and a gas car.
Yep. Quite the paradox.
Electric for short trips, gas for long. It really is both. The Lexus RX plug-in hybrid.
Get special offers on select Lexus models.
Looking for a job is lonely. Endless searching, phone calls that go nowhere, applications that vanish into thin air. What if you could link with dozens of local companies who are hiring right now with just one connection? That's Express Employment Professionals. One call, one application, and no fees ever for job seekers. One connection, endless opportunities. Express Employment Professionals.
I have type 2 diabetes, but I manage it well. It's a little pill with a big story to tell. I take once daily Jardiance at each day's start. As time went on, it was easy to see I'm lowering my A1C.
Jardiance works 24/7 in your body to flush out some sugar. And for adults with type 2 diabetes and known heart disease, Jardiance can lower the risk of cardiovascular death, too.
Serious side effects may include ketoacidosis that may be fatal, dehydration that can lead to sudden worsening of kidney function, and genital yeast or urinary tract infections. A rare life-threatening bacterial infection in the skin of the perineum could occur. Stop Jardiance and call your doctor right away if you have symptoms of this infection, ketoacidosis, or an allergic reaction. You may have increased risk for lower limb loss. Call your doctor right away if you have symptoms of infection in your legs or feet. Taking Jardiance with sulfonylurea or insulin may cause low blood sugar.
Jardiance is really swell.